Am I still a man if I don't feel like one anymore? That was the question that stopped me cold. It came from Richard, a 76-year-old retired teacher who sat across from me with trembling hands. Not from Parkinson's or illness, but from something quieter, something deeper. "I don't feel anything down there anymore," he said, eyes heavy with something far more painful than physical discomfort. "I touch myself sometimes, but I feel hollow afterward. Did I do something wrong?" His voice carried no shame, only grief, the kind of quiet grief that comes from years of not knowing. Years of thinking you're just getting old, when in reality, no one ever taught you how to age with intimacy. You see, after 60, no one pulls you aside and says, "Hey, your body's going to change." But that doesn't mean you're broken. No one explains why your drive fades, why sensations dull, or why that familiar habit, masturbation, can either keep you alive or slowly disconnect you from everything you used to be. In this video, I'm going to share 5 deeply misunderstood truths about masturbation after 60. Truths that could change not just how you touch yourself, but how you reconnect with your manhood, your confidence, your peace of mind. These are the lessons I wish every man knew before his body whispered, "You forgot me." If you've ever felt that silence, this video is for you. Let's begin. Richard wasn't the only man who asked that heartbreaking question. A few months earlier, another patient, Mr. Leonard, 72, looked at me, his voice breaking as he said, "Doc, I can't perform like I used to. Does that mean I'm not a man anymore?" His words weren't angry, they were scared, they were tired. And unfortunately, I hear this far more often than you might think. Too many older men have spent years quietly panicking about a change they were never prepared for, when their erections no longer feel firm, fast, or predictable. In their minds, it's the end of their manhood. But here's the truth I wish every man over 60 could hear. Your erection is no longer the whole story. And that's not failure. That's evolution. As we age, our bodies don't betray us, they just speak a new language. Blood flow slows, testosterone levels fluctuate, nerves take longer to respond. What used to feel automatic now asks for patience, presence, and intention. And that doesn't mean your sexuality is broken, it means it's maturing. It means there's a different path now. One not driven by performance, but by connection. The world you and I grew up in taught us to define manhood through hardness and stamina. We were praised for lasting long, not feeling deep. No one ever told us that you don't need a perfect erection to feel pleasure. No one said that orgasm and erection are two different things. I've had patients, many, who spent years believing they were defective until one day they discovered that intimacy doesn't disappear. It simply changes shape. You can still feel emotional closeness. You can still experience intense, warm, satisfying release, even if your body doesn't react the way it did at 25. But that truth was never written in any magazine. It was never whispered in locker rooms. So we carry this grief quietly, like we've lost something that was never actually gone. It just transformed. And what matters now isn't performance, not pressure, but permission, not shame, but curiosity. When you stop chasing what you were and begin honoring who you are now, that's when your intimacy deepens. That's when you stop fearing the bedroom and start rediscovering it. I've seen men return to joy, to desire, to dignity, not because their erections returned, but because they let go of needing them to feel whole. That's why this first secret matters so much, because it's not just about how your body works, it's about how you see yourself as a man when the old rules no longer apply. And trust me, if you're willing to shift your perspective, you might just find that what you're capable of now is far more powerful than you ever imagined. After Leonard accepted that erections weren't the only measure of manhood, he asked me something even more vulnerable. Then why do I feel so empty afterwards? That question led us somewhere deeper. And that's where Secret 2 begins. I want to introduce you to someone else. His name was Howard, a 77-year-old veteran who came to see me not because of a medical emergency, but because, in his words, I just don't feel anything anymore. At first, he thought it was physical, that age had dulled his desire. But the more we talked, the more it became clear. He hadn't stopped wanting, he'd stopped connecting. Howard told me he masturbated almost every night, not out of lust, but out of habit, out of loneliness, to help himself fall asleep, to fill the silence. But it wasn't working anymore. The ritual had stayed, but the meaning had faded. What Howard didn't know, and what most men are never told, is that masturbation isn't just about release. It's not just about stimulation. It's about your brain, your emotions, your nervous system. You see, when you orgasm, your body releases a powerful cocktail of chemicals. Dopamine to reward you, serotonin to calm you, oxytocin to connect you. These chemicals aren't just about pleasure, they regulate your mood, they help you sleep, they reduce anxiety and restore emotional balance. That's why, for men who live alone, who don't get as many hugs or words of affection or moments of real closeness, masturbation becomes more than just sexual. It becomes a lifeline. But here's the danger. When we do it mindlessly, when it becomes just another routine, when we touch ourselves without feeling, our bodies may go through the motions, but our souls remain untouched. Over time, this disconnect can make us numb. We begin to feel less, want less, expect less. That's what happened to Howard. He thought he was broken, but really he was doing something sacred without presence. Once we reframed the act, brought intention back into it, everything changed. I asked him to try something simple. Instead of rushing, just pause. Instead of escaping, just breathe. I said, Howard, the next time you touch yourself, do it as if you were caring for someone you deeply loved, someone who's been through a lot, someone who deserves gentleness. He nodded, and weeks later he came back and said, for the first time in years, I actually felt something. That's the power of presence. That's the difference between coping and healing. Masturbation, when done with intention, can be an act of emotional clarity, a ritual of reconnection, a way to remind your nervous system, I'm still here, I still matter, I still feel, and that matters. Especially now, because the older we get, the quieter our emotions become, but they never disappear, they just wait for us to listen again. Now let's go even deeper, because what happens when you stop listening for too long? What happens when you go months, even years, without touching yourself at all? That's where Roy's story begins. After Howard rediscovered what it meant to feel again, another man, Roy, walked into my office looking defeated. He was 74, widowed, and for the first time in over a decade, he had met someone new. I finally found someone, he said, but my body, it doesn't work anymore. His eyes carried both hope and heartbreak. He wanted to reconnect, to be close again, But he was terrified he had missed his chance. What Roy didn't know, and what so many older men have never been told, is that his problem wasn't dysfunction, it was disuse. This is the third truth I wish every man over 60 knew. Use it or lose it isn't just a saying, it's biology. Just like your muscles weaken without movement, the tissues in your penis, blood vessels, smooth muscle, nerve endings begin to atrophy when not engaged over time. The body adapts to what you ask of it. If you ask nothing, it begins to shut down that system. Slowly, quietly, nerves dull, circulation slows, elasticity fades. You may not notice it at first, until one day, like Roy, you realize something important has gone silent. And no one warned you. Roy told me he hadn't touched himself in years, not because he didn't care, but because life had numbed his desire. He assumed it was part of aging. He gave up on intimacy before intimacy ever gave up on him. The good news, his body hadn't forgotten. It had just been waiting. I guided Roy through a very gentle routine. No pressure, no expectations, just consistent, slow stimulation. Touch, breath, presence. And within weeks, he started to feel things again, subtle at first, then stronger. And along with that came something even more powerful, confidence. He smiled differently, walked lighter, spoke with a warmth that hadn't been there before. That's the hidden truth most men don't realize. Masturbation isn't just about pleasure. It's about preserving function, preserving identity. You don't need a partner to stay sexually healthy. You don't need a perfect erection to stay sexually alive. You just need to stay connected to your body, consistently, compassionately. Even a few moments a week of mindful stimulation can keep blood flowing, nerves activated, and tissues engaged. It's like watering a plant, not because it's dying, but because it deserves to thrive. So if you've been distant from yourself, if you've let that part of you go silent, I want you to know it's not too late. Like Roy, your body may just be waiting for your return, waiting for that quiet message that says, I still care. And now that you know this, you might be wondering, if disuse can slowly shut you down, what happens when the way you use your body actually rewires your brain in the wrong direction? That's where we're going next. After Roy began reconnecting with his body, I met Ernest, a 68-year-old widower with a quiet sadness in his eyes. He told me, I still touch myself, but it doesn't feel like anything anymore. He wasn't numb physically, he was numb emotionally. At first, we explored the usual causes, circulation, hormones, sleep, but nothing added up until I asked, do you use porn when you touch yourself? He hesitated, then nodded. Every night, he said, just to feel something. That's when the picture became clear. What Ernest and so many men don't realize is that porn doesn't just entertain, it conditions. And over time, it can quietly retrain your brain in ways that rob you of real, natural sensitivity. Let me explain. When you watch porn, your brain gets flooded with dopamine, your reward chemical. Each new image, each different body, each unexpected scenario gives you a spike. Your brain loves novelty, so it starts rewiring itself to only respond to high-intensity, fast-paced visual stimulation. That's not intimacy. That's overstimulation. And what happens when you spend months, years, responding only to that? Touch from a real person, a slower pace, even your own hand, begins to feel dull. That's what Ernest was facing. His body still wanted to feel, but his brain had been taught that only screens were worth reacting to. He said it felt like living in a room where the lights were on, but the windows were sealed shut. He could see, but he couldn't connect. And this isn't just about emotions. There's neurobiology behind it. The more you rely on extreme porn for arousal, the more you desensitize your dopamine pathways. Your brain becomes less responsive to real connection. That's why men like Ernest, who are emotionally available, who want to feel again, can't. Not because they're broken, because they've been conditioned. So what did we do? We didn't shame him. We didn't ask him to quit cold turkey. We helped him slowly ease back into himself. He started by turning off the screen. Then he began using memory, imagination, his breath, his hand. At first he felt nothing. Then something flickered, a sensation, a memory, a spark. Within weeks, Ernest said, "I didn't think I could feel this again." But he did. Because the truth is, you don't lose your sensitivity forever. You just have to reintroduce it. If porn has become your go-to, ask yourself, is it still giving you what you truly need? Or has it quietly taken something from you? You deserve to feel again. Not just arousal, but presence. Not just stimulation, but connection. And now, let's bring everything together. Because in the final truth, we'll talk about what masturbation can truly become at this stage of life. Not a secret, not a symptom, but a sacred healing act of self-care. After helping Ernest reconnect with real sensation, I sat down one afternoon with Walter. He was 75, polite, soft-spoken, and almost finished with his annual checkup. When he paused, "Doctor," he asked, "is it still okay to touch myself at this age?" That simple question cut deeper than any lab result ever could, because it wasn't about technique. It was about permission. Walter had been widowed for 6 years. Since his wife passed, he had stopped everything. Stopped trying. Stopped feeling. Stopped allowing himself any form of pleasure. "I thought it was inappropriate," he said. "I didn't think I was allowed to still be that kind of man." That sentence stayed with me, because it's the same one I've heard in different forms from dozens, maybe hundreds of older men. We live in a world that teaches men to shrink with age, to disappear quietly, to let go of touch, joy, and intimacy like they're childish things. But here's the truth I've learned across 3 decades of practice. Desire doesn't retire. It evolves. It softens. It becomes quieter, but it never disappears. And if we stop listening to it, it turns into loneliness. This is why I believe masturbation at this stage of life can be more than just okay. It can be essential. Not as a guilty pleasure, not as a secret habit, but as a sacred form of self-care. A way to remind yourself that you're still here, still feeling, still deserving. Done with awareness, it keeps your pelvic tissues healthy by encouraging blood flow. It supports prostate health by clearing residual fluid. It releases calming neurochemicals that ease anxiety and promote sleep. But beyond all that, it's a way back to your own body. When Walter finally gave himself permission, when he touched himself not to chase youth, but to rediscover worth, something shifted. His mood lifted. He slept better. He smiled more. "I feel like I've come home," he told me. And he had. Not to some younger version of himself, but to a wiser, gentler, and more honest man. One who no longer needed the world's approval to feel whole. So if you've ever felt ashamed or unsure or invisible, please hear me. There is nothing shameful about wanting to feel alive. There is nothing inappropriate about loving yourself when no one else is around. There is nothing unmanly about reconnecting with the one person who's been with you through it all, you. In this final truth, I hope you see what was never gone, only waiting. And now, let's bring it all together. Because the 5 secrets we've uncovered, they weren't really about masturbation. They were about reclaiming your right to feel, to connect, to be human again. So here we are, 5 secrets, 5 conversations that most men never got to have, 5 truths that weren't really about masturbation at all, but about something deeper. Your right to feel, your right to matter, your right to still be alive inside. We started by dismantling the myth that your erection defines your manhood. Leonard showed us that pleasure and connection still exist, just in a different shape. Then we looked at Howard's story and realized that masturbation isn't just physical, it's emotional, neurological, a quiet, sacred ritual of reclaiming calm and presence. With Roy, we learned the biological truth. When you stop using that part of your body, it doesn't vanish. It waits, like a forgotten garden, until you water it again. Ernest taught us that porn can steal not just your sensitivity, but your imagination, that the path back to feeling real again is slow but possible. And finally, Walter reminded us that even after loss, after silence, after years of forgetting your own worth, you can still come home to yourself. Because here's the truth, desire doesn't retire, it matures. And you are still a man, still whole, still worthy of pleasure, connection, and dignity. If these stories moved you, if you saw yourself in Leonard, Howard, Roy, Ernest, or Walter, then I want you to know you're not broken, you're not done, you're just rediscovering what was never gone. Only waiting. And if this message spoke to you, I invite you to leave a comment below. Tell me which story resonated most. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because we break the silence together, and together we heal. One honest conversation at a time. Before, Leonard believed he was no longer a man. Howard touched himself nightly but felt nothing. Roy thought intimacy had left him forever. Ernest couldn't connect with reality outside a screen. Walter had silenced every part of himself for years. After, they all found something they thought they had lost, not just sensation, but dignity, softness, self-worth, and joy. They didn't return to who they were, they became who they were always meant to be. And maybe now, so can you.